Think of Fred as like a cartoon feature. He's one t-shirts and posters and as the butt of kinds of jokes and so on. I think many of us are ambivalent to the perfectly his role is a contemporary thought. On the one hand, it's very common to, for instance, see a friend who is sharpening all their parents' style and making sure all their other writing articles and the good order and say, oh, they were being very anal. For example, of somebody Mike said, your behavior is very neurotic. It's common science to describe a set of human behavior in terms that Freud and many of his colleagues popularized in the first part of the 12th century. On the other hand, as I have said, many people think of Freud as someone poised between science and literally, and it's by no means the case that psychoanalysis and movement has anything like the perstic that they did 1575 years ago. So I think many of us are ambivalent at between. On the one hand, we want to try to explain our own and others' behavior in psychoanalytic terms of the list using some of the principles of psychoanalysis. But on the other hand, we are not sure that the chosen passes must according to the contemporary standards. In a sense, we want to have our cake and eat it too when it comes to using psychoanalytic ideas. The question is that a legitimate attitude to have, and if not, why is it not? But back to the principle of interest to the best explanation, just to make sure we are clear. In specifically, it is a perfectly adequate method of trying of justify a hypothesis and how things work. So, for example, about a century ago, in the early half of the 12th century, scientists came forward with the idea of plate tectonic as the explanation for a number of phenomena that the other sides puzzling such are earthquakes and the creatures on mountain ranges. For about a half a century after that, evidence about the spreading of the sulfur came to provide pretty powerful justification for the theory. So that while generally speaking one can't observe the movement of plates that's making up the crush of the earth, nonetheless one can get inside evidence such as the sulfur spreading growth of mountains, erosions of volcanoes, and many other things that can be accounted for according to the theory of plate tectonics. And that's right, it provides powerful support for the theory. That theory is widely accepted by scientists today. Can something like that happen for Freud's approach? That's a question that's well be asking. Now, as Freud begins to present his theory of the primary unconscious mind, he tells us there are two Kurkus hypotheses in psychoanalysis described as an answer to the entire word. One of them is first of this, the claim that the unconscious processes. The second one is the idea that those particular unconscious processes and primary engaged with in place of the sexual and violent character that he thinks are the bulk of what's happening in our unconscious mind, and according to him explain a lot of human behavior. Whereas today it's second nature almost to suppose that there are unconscious processes that account for human behavior. A century or so ago, that Walt and Diet have been shocking. It was think in the incredible influence that the search and many of us followed has a primary. Western intellectual answer is should come as no surprise. That today of a mental state is almost something that brings with the definition the idea that's a vault of concourse. Remember, for the century, if you are state of believing, of wanting, of expansion, of wondering and experiencing something, then you can't help but notice that is less if you pay a tiny bit attention to your own mind. That's why Descartes was able to in the process of developing to have a Rickrow's theory of the psychological world, started with introspection, what it starts of which in the idea that's a called summary what going on inside of his mind, and be sure on the cause everything to the was looking for. Whereas afraid right, some processes are not open to introspection. Other processes are very difficult to find by means of introspection, but they prefer more shocking exactly. For the late Victorian audience, this was speaking to that though progress very much about sexuality and violence. The idea being that without perfectly being aware of it, many of have that powerful urges towards repetitive sexual activity, towards inherent violence that left through their own device would probably express themselves in our behavior, but somehow we must, if manage or not to do so. It will require some explaining as how that goes. So let me just go back to the notions of the unconscious to make sure that we make clear about what is it. There is a difference between something being non-conscious and something being unconscious. There are all kinds of phenomena that happen inside me to be non-conscious and not just and science unconscious. That grow my find bias, my metabolism, the processing that happens that produce a visual image. For example, our processes with me are non-conscious, but that does don't not make the unconscious. What will be required to make a process inside me unconscious? I would have to be a mental phenomenon. As we will be before, mental phenomena divide to the three primary types. Cognitive, things like belief, explanation, information processing, exactly. Affective, the going to include case of emotion and moods where emotionless. Are mental states that come with a feeling, but they also have an object. There will